Oh, I can't talk. It's like a thing where people drink coffee or tea and talk about books. It really helps like break the ice a little bit for me because I feel very awkward and I have no idea where to start. When in doubt, sip it out. All right, so we're going to talk about the books that I've read at this first half of the year. This will be part one, and I'll do another video like this at the end of the year to talk about the books that I read in the second half of the year. I did this last year as well, and it was a lot of fun. So here we go, keeping on the tradition, my very infrequent book review videos. This year, I guess it's actually only been 4 months and then a little, because we're now a little bit into May, and I just finished up my last book like 2 days ago, and I feel very sad that I am done with it, but we'll talk about it in just a minute. I've read 10 books so far, and that's like kind of 2 books a month, which is cool. Definitely more than I read at the beginning of last year. So we have 3 nonfiction and 7 fiction. And there is definitely a macabre theme once again. It's a lot of true crime and murder mysteries and even a horror. So let's get started. This was one of my favorite books so far this year, called The Wicked Boy by Kate Summerscale. This is the 3rd book that I've read by this author, and I really like her approach to nonfiction. She's very straight to the point, matter of fact, writes the facts and doesn't fill it in with fluff to make it more entertaining, but her writing is entertaining and engaging and consistent, and it flows really nicely. But it is definitely like at 10 a.m. so-and-so walked to this street. At 10:15 he was reported to have taken a left-hand turn on blah 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 street. But somehow the way she words it, it all just flows really nicely. But I appreciate that it feels like you're reading a lot more of what actually happened rather than her opinions or what other people think. Although there is still a lot of that. There's always a lot of that when writing history. So this takes place in the late 1800s in London. I don't want to give any spoilers, so I don't know how to approach this. It's about someone that murdered someone. And it's really fascinating. And I really appreciate that she takes this person, the murderer, you kind of follow him throughout his whole life and get to see other potential perspectives maybe, because nothing is ever black and white, right? You know, there's always a reason for the things that we do. And she also gives you a lot of context for the time, so maybe things that aren't necessarily relevant to the story or the people themselves, but it's relevant to the time. So on May 1st in 1895, this happened in London. It didn't necessarily impact the people involved in this case, but it still happened, and it was a part of their world and that they were experiencing. So I like that about her writing. I think this may be my favorite of hers so far. The other 2 that I have read are Suspicions of Mr. Witcher and The Haunting of Elma Felding. The next book was also a nonfiction called Mrs. Sherlock Holmes, and I really enjoyed this story because the woman it's about, who was the first U.S. district attorney, Oh, I can't talk. This is about a lawyer, detective woman. She was the first female U.S. district attorney. Her name is Grace Humiston. I don't know why we don't hear more about her. I feel like this should be a name that we discuss a lot, because she did a lot of incredible things. Now, in the beginning, the story was really, really inspiring, just to see like someone taking action and all the justice, and it just, yeah, like I said, it was really inspiring. By the end of it, it fell a little flat, and I don't know if that's just because things happened in her life that were less inspiring, and she definitely made a lot of enemies, and it's really hard to know whether people were speaking badly of her because she was getting to the root of things, or because maybe she was creating drama out of nothing. It was hard for me to gauge. The one thing I will say about this author that he's a good author, however, he definitely writes this much more like a fiction novel, and he infers a lot. He puts in his own thoughts and opinions, not opinions, but what he thinks how people would be reacting. So he fills in a lot of the blanks. It's not just facts, which at first was a little off-putting because that's not usually how I like my nonfiction. But by the end of it, I really enjoyed it. It was an engaging story. Hi, Bean. And I definitely am glad to have read this. It was definitely one of the favorites of this year so far as well. Then the next book I read was a fiction. This is called The Sanatorium by Sarah Pearse, and I really loved this. It was just a very spooky, creepy, perfectly set murder mystery. And it had all the right elements. Like, it was in this really remote mountain town with a blizzard and a sanatorium. It was just really well written. It just was very clean and crisp and interesting and believable, and the characters were fascinating, and I really liked it. I've actually already pre-ordered her second book called The Retreat, so I look forward to that a lot. Then I read Fury by Salman Rushdie, and this book made me all sorts of things. Furious was one of them. I just was really angry a lot of the time and really depressed and empty. I felt there was like waves of just feeling really empty, and there's no meaning to life, and life is just terrible, and it was hard to read. And at times I was like, I think I'm taking this book a little too seriously. I think it's supposed to be a little bit more absurd and humorous than how I'm interpreting it. I like his writing. He's an interesting writer for sure. Definitely has a very unique voice. The pacing of it was really easy to read. It was just very quick, and it was like, I'm going to grab your hand and drag you along, and that's it. We're not looking back. We're not pausing. But I have complicated feelings about this because I don't like feeling angry or sad or empty when reading a book. This maybe not my cup of tea. So then I felt like I needed to read something really silly and lighthearted after that. And this is probably just all of those things. The Whispered Word, this is the second book in the Secret Book and Scone Society. I read the first one last year, and while it also wasn't my cup of tea because there's a lot of elements that I generally am not drawn to because I have a hard time relating to, because it's about women, this group of women that kind of form a little club. Anyways, but I really end up enjoying it. They're fun. I did forget to add that this is a murder mystery series, and I don't know if I'm going to continue with it. Then it turned into, I did a little personal, basically got a self-help book called Will I Ever Be Good Enough? And I'm just going to skim through this really quick because it is really personal and I don't want to get into any of the details. It was very hard to read. It's a really good book, and I'm very grateful that I read it. I feel like it was very valuable. I book-eared so many of the pages that I probably will have to revisit in the future because it's always a process, and it's a long process. But it definitely brought up a lot of things that were hard to face, and it was challenging, but I'm glad I read it. So after reading that, I read 3 books basically in a day, each of them. So it took 3 days to read just something fun and cozy and from my favorite genre, which is mysteries. These are all MC Beaton's. I love MC Beaton. She is probably, as far as mysteries go, mystery writers, Agatha Christie and MC Beaton may be my favorite. And so I'm going through and reading it, trying to read in order, because I've never read any of the books in order. So now I'm going back and reading all of them in order. I read 2 from the Agatha Raisin mystery. These are the first 2, The Quiche of Death and then The Vicious Bet. and they're just really fun and engaging, and Agatha Raisin is a trip, and they're funny. I mean, I think on one of them, or maybe this is a different one, but people call MC Beaton the coziest of mystery writers. And then I read another book by MC Beaton with her character Hamish Macbeth, who is also a really fun character. And this one is Death of an Outsider. And I actually have big plans to have the Hamish Macbeth series all in hardback books. So I'm kind of in progress trying to do that. This one is going to be replaced very soon with a hardback, but I found this one at the used bookstore, so I'll probably sell it back. Anyways, those were really fun. And then last but not least, this was really fun. Uzumaki. This was a manga horror, and the graphics are just so great. They were so beautiful, and it is, it's graphic. There's some weird things that definitely take place. It's very horror theme driven. So for a long time, I feel like there isn't any character development or plot development or story arc. It's just all about these horrific events that keep taking place. And it took a little while for it to feel like, oh, there is a story arc there after all. There is they are learning more about why these horrific events are happening. But I feel like it took a long time to get there. Suffice it to say, for all that I felt it was lacking initially, I really enjoyed this. It just had me engaged. I really wanted to keep reading. I couldn't put it down, in fact, and anytime I was doing something else, I was thinking about it. So I think in the end, it was really good. And I ordered another from this author, Junji Ito, and I look forward to reading another one of his books or mangas. So that is it. Those are all the books that I've read so far this year. Thanks again for coming and watching, and I hope that you enjoyed this. I'd love to know what books you've read this year so far, and if there's any that you recommend that you just really, really enjoyed and you think everyone should read it. So I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.